From Colony Brands, Tim Fischer joins us. First, some supporters to thank, and thank you for listening. This episode is supported by CCW Digital, leaders responsible for operations, information technology, contact centers, customer care, service, and support are invited to register for a free CCW Digital membership. Membership includes networking with 100,000 plus qualified industry professionals, quarterly executive research reports, product matchmaking, and more. Go to ccwdigital.com to join the community. This episode is also supported by the CCW Conference and Expo. The event will empower you to test, learn, and try the next big thing in customer experience optimization. Are you interested in mining data across touch points for personalized and predictive data? Are you trying to integrate your systems to get a more complete view of the customer? Are you figuring out what innovations to invest in? Chatbots, virtual assistants, AI, VR, biometrics, to name a few? Go to callcenterweek.com to register. Recorded at CCW, Tim Fischer joins us as the Director of Contact Center and Order Processing at Colony Brands. It shares that every morning he zeroes in on what today's going to look like based on how yesterday went and what to expect for the rest of the week. Tim's job is to maintain the strong employee-focused culture and to execute on the organization's roadmap. The culture has been recognized by Forbes as one of the best companies to work for based on the fact that Tim looks for hardworking people in small towns across the Midwest, and so he says they've got a lot of folks who can naturally treat people well. Regarding the roadmap, Tim says that it's all about preparedness and knowing your numbers and how you're performing so you can justify how you're going to pay for what's on the roadmap, which sometimes pays for itself. Welcome to CCW Digital on B2B IQ. I'm your host, Seth Adler. Download episodes on ccwdigital.com or through our app in iTunes, within the iTunes podcast app in Google Play, or wherever you currently get your podcasts. Tim Fischer.
The names that are probably the most popular, the company started with Swiss Colony, known for its chocolates, gift baskets, cheeses, sausages, that sort of thing. And then a more recent acquisition in the past few years was Montgomery Ward's. So we're bringing Montgomery Ward's back to life in a catalog and online form.
Got it. Not in the big store, big box kind of footprint format.
Exactly. And we also have about 8 other catalog brands. We have a total of 3 food catalogs, and the rest are, Montgomery Ward's basically a source. You can get just about anything there. But we also have some clothing catalogs, women's clothing mostly.
Direct to consumer.
Yes. Direct to consumer. I guess you would consider some of our bigger competitors to be along the lines of Finger Hut, Walmart online. A lot of the online retailers we consider direct competition.
Walmart, of course, a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine there's another competitor that we're not mentioning that starts with A, right?
Yep.
What I guess then is the special sauce, if you will, right? What is the brand language? What is the brand affinity that I have with some of your brands that I simply can't get at these other, destinations that you mentioned?
Well, sure. We're a little more in the subprime market.
Okay.
So that's why a lot of people may not have heard of some of our brands. Is really we're looking to offer credit to people who are not always able to easily get credit. So we're somewhat of a credit company, so to speak, that actually sells products. So most people think of us as a catalog company, but really it's a credit company that sells products via catalog and online.
Why is that? How does that all work?
It's kind of a niche market, so to speak. I believe the ownership of it's privately held company, and I believe the ownership at some point decided that a lot of the people that were actually working in the small towns that we have our businesses in is a lot of the people in those towns needed that type of help and support, and so it was not only a means to help people, but to also find a market that for the types of products in the catalogs.
So it almost sounds like that's now what you're doing with your brands, meaning Montgomery Ward, once a vaunted retailer in the Midwest. Now that brand dovetails with consumer that you just described. Is that fair?
Yes. Little older consumer. You know, where a lot of companies are going for the the 30s, the higher income customer. We're shooting more for a little more aged customer with that may have those income limitations of often associated with being older.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Medical bills and such, right?
Yeah,
There's other stuff to pay attention to. What about you? What are you paying attention to? What does your, day entail? What's the remit for Tim Fischer?
So I'm a director of contact centers and order processing. So for me, my day is, for the most part, start off every morning with kind of a call, get where we're at, what the day is going to look like, how yesterday went, what we're expecting for tomorrow and the rest of the week, with my site managers for the different call centers that we have. And that really kicks off the day. And then for the most part, my job is making sure that the culture is maintained. We have a real strong employee focused culture, and then also executing upon a roadmap.
All right. So as far as the employee culture, it's strong. Why and how?
We actually had some recognition from Forbes and everything as one of the best companies to work for. And we do a lot. Again, we're in small towns. In fact, one of our contact centers is even in an unincorporated town.
Great.
And, what we're really looking for is hardworking people. We kind of stuck to the Midwest. We've got a lot of people who can naturally treat people well.
Yeah.
So what we do to keep them feeling good about the company, we have employee discounts. We have employee stores. We have a mascot with Swiss Colony, the mouse that we have an actual mascot that goes around to takes pictures with our employees and that sort of thing. I personally go around with executives each Christmas time, and we hand out employee gifts to all of our call center agents and employees all throughout the company. So cookouts, I would say probably 25% of my job is just going around to the sites and making sure that we're making sure that the culture is being maintained and that employees are having a good time while they're at work as well.
Yeah, totally engaged. And it sounds like these are the jobs that we're looking for in small town USA, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's we're in a lot of towns where it's difficult to find a position, and then to have one that you can actually have fun at as well. That's not manufacturing or what have you. People really gravitate towards those roles. So,
are you from a small town yourself?
I am. I grew up on a farm in a small town. If I would have stayed in that particular town, I would have been in a high school graduating class of 17.
Oh, boy.
I went to a neighboring town and graduated in a class of 60. The county I'm from, which is right near the headquarters, is
and where is that?
Monroe, Wisconsin.
Okay.
In fact, the county still to this day does not have a stoplight in it. So it's a very rural area, and but good people, salt of the earth type of people that again will be hardworking.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have that farm background or what have you, and are able to again treat people well.
Besides rooting for the Green Bay Packers,
yes,
I would imagine that it was busy times on the farm. What were you responsible for as a little kid?
As a kid, I was, for the most part, in charge of feeding the calves, making sure all the calf pens were ready. I did a lot of field work. I'm actually a part-time farmer again. My father recently passed away at age 84, and he had a fully operational farm other than no longer milking cows, but beef, cattle, and pigs. So actually on the weekends right now, I'm out working on a farm again until we get everything rented out and taken care of.
Is it refreshing, though, kind of literally going back to the earth,
It is. I do enjoy that kind of, when you're sitting in a tractor, you don't have to think a whole lot. You just kind of drive, and that's it. You got to
do the thing.
Yeah, exactly. We're at work, my mind's constantly moving. So
that's it.
During my day job.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So on the farm, taking care of the calves. Thanks so much, Tim. Did you get out of the 17-person class into the 60-person class, which is, gargantuan
yes,
in comparison.
Culture shock. Yes.
Of course. Did you go to college? What was the next step?
Yep. The next step, strangely enough, I started out to school to be agricultural mechanic in a small technical college in Madison, Wisconsin.
You say strangely enough, that makes perfect sense to me.
Well,
right?
it makes perfect sense, but the end result doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So
you didn't make good on your promise.
Yes, exactly. So I spent a year and a half of that. Actually enjoyed it quite a bit, but decided I needed to be more had some back issues. Couldn't be climbing around equipment all my life, so decided I needed an office job and switched to marketing. And so I have an associate's degree in marketing and a 1-year diploma in small business planning and development from the local technical college.
Got it. And what was the first place to, be so kind as to say, hey, Tim, you can work here?
Yeah. Well, there were a couple odds and ends types of things. A Blockbuster Video back when video stores really existed and that sort of thing. But a sub shop making sub sandwiches. But my first real job, contact center job, was while I was in college with a place called Great Lakes Educational Loan Services, and I was collecting on student loans.
Yeah.
Moved up through the organization there over time, spent about 7 years there. Was very fortunate to have a manager that invested a lot of training in me, gave me some opportunities, and kind of moved on from there.
Were you able to draw any parallels between what you were doing on the farm and what you were doing in the call center?
Mainly the work ethic. I was willing to put in the extra time growing up on a farm. I was working 7 days a week, right? You can't just take off time or the cattle don't get fed or what have you. So,
right.
The work ethic, I think, was a big thing. And because I was there so much and working, I was acquiring more knowledge and learning. Also on a farm, something breaks down, you've got to fix it, right? You've got to do it. You might be able to pay somebody to do it, and it takes a while, but you've got to figure it out. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've picked up over my career, and why I've been successful in my career is execution. You've got to actually do the things. A lot of people know what needs to be done. What separates some people is actually executing upon those things and doing them.
Yeah. Hey, this thing's broken. I can't do it anymore.
Right.
Tim's thought is...
Or it's too expensive. How am I ever going to get this? How am I ever going to justify paying for this?
Right.
And it's, you've got to do the preparation and actually execute. You got to get your numbers right, understand your numbers, all of that sort of thing to get to where you need to go. And
you mentioned early on, as far as your current position, delivering on the roadmap. And that brings us to that. So... How do you do that in the moment? How do you do that in the day, the week, if we're talking about, how long is the roadmap that you have?
Yeah, well, preparedness, right? And again, I'll go back to knowing your numbers. We're at a conference right now. And
CCW, certainly.
I hear a lot of people say that, I don't know how I'd ever be able to pay for this or how I'd talk my executives into, acquiring this or what have you. And it really goes back to being prepared, knowing what your numbers are, understanding what your cost per minute is, figuring that out, and they're not complex numbers really. You just got to talk with your accounting department or whoever does the accounting, figure out what your costs are and divide that into your total minutes of your phone time and what have you. And voila, you've got your cost per minute. Now you've got your cost per minute, now you can start creating a return on investment or a business case for something. And so you've got to know what your numbers are, how you're performing, so that you are able to justify how you're going to pay for those things on your roadmap. And then also what I've always found is a lot of the things that that you want to have on your roadmap and that sort of thing do pay for themselves. Every once in a while there's a break even, and very rarely is there something that doesn't pay for itself. So
because you know your numbers.
Because you know your numbers and you can make the business case. Yeah.
All right, that's all well and good, Tim, right? But I feel like you come from a company that certainly looks at the bottom line, and so we're not just going to go ahead and buy everything that Tim wants to buy whenever he wants to buy it, even though he's justified it with his numbers.
Right.
Talk about working through a no.
So there was a process I picked up at a conference a long time ago. There's a couple of things. Change management is one, right? You have to understand what your environment is and understand how it's going to impact your people and your staff. But then also kind of an order of things. For example, one of the strategies that I look at is before I make a big purchase, let's say ACD platform or a whole new phone system or whatever it might be. I look at what things can I do to decrease the footprint first, or in other words, what things can I do to decrease headcount. So is there ways I can reduce some handle time? Is there that sort of thing? So that in the long term, I'm not spending more on licensing for that's going to cost me a whole lot when I buy that phone system in the future. So you got to kind of make sure you've got the incremental things taken care of, processes, that sort of thing, so that you're in a better place to execute in the long term.
So almost here are the cost savings on the way in. You know, if you say yes now, we can cut these costs immediately, even before we spend.
Right. Get your low hanging fruit kind of removed first, so that so that the price tag isn't as big when you're starting to look at things in the future.
Right. So this all seems so easy. What don't we understand, Tim? Why is this so easy for you when it's so difficult for us?
Well, it's I've been doing this 22 years now, right? This I kind of fell into call centers. It was a job while I was going to school part time. So it's lots of experience. I spent time at Great Lakes, like I told you. I moved on to a utility company after that in their call center. Duluth Trading Company at one point for a couple of years.
I want to stop you there.
Sure.
Because that's a brand, man. I see the commercials. I want to be a part of that brand. So tell us what it's like inside. I mean, they got the deep, low voice, right? They tell me how I wear my pants already. They tell me what's happening with my shirt. And they describe precisely why I need the exact thing that they're selling that day. Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty fun environment. It's, again, small town in Wisconsin, and it's a very homey type environment. The guy that they fashion a lot of their advertising off of is actually lives in the same town as me. We're friends, hang out every once in a while.
Does he work for the company?
He works for the company. He's the art director, crazy enough. So it's kind of funny. This big, burly, bald-headed guy with a big beard and everything is the art guy. I always give him a hard time about that. No, it's, again, another privately held company. It's grown through very clever marketing and working hard on their marketing, but they've got a very solid quality product as well. That they design a lot of their products in-house.
And then what is the culture inside? Like, okay, we've got a great product and we've got great kind of means with which to get to the consumer. What about the culture inside, though?
Yeah, the culture inside is pretty similar to what we're doing at Colony Brands. As far as there's employee store or employee discounts, employee store. Again, the small town, hometown type of people working in the contact center that in a small town. That doesn't have a lot of their alternatives are manufacturing and line jobs and that sort of thing. So, keeping the people happy and engaged, a lot of product training, knowledge, that sort of thing, and there's a lot of loyalty in those folks in those small towns.
All right, so here we go. We've got two examples of good Midwest companies employing folks in real ways with real jobs in small town USA. What do you say to me when I say, what you can do? Call center, I call it a cost center, right?
Sure.
We can just trim all that fat and automate the whole thing and do some voice recognition stuff and save a ton of money.
Yeah, well, that's great and all. I've heard that over the years from different places. I worked at Hewlett-Packard as well for several years, and they were in a process of trying to make the company cost effective so they could sell off the services part of the company, and the thing that you have to watch out for is customer. You want the long-term play. with the customer. You don't want them to be a one and done customer. And even if they have a customer service issue, if you're fixing that correctly, we've been able to show at most of the companies I've been with that, the numbers don't lie. Again, know your numbers. And even that touch with an agent, that customer, even if it was because the customer had an issue, that customer is likely going to have a long-term value with your company than if they, have the impersonal, your frequently asked questions on a website or what have you. That's great and all if that helps answer the question, divert some of the easy stuff, but you're losing that touch, that opportunity to separate yourself from your competition.
And this is not just like your opinion, man. You've seen these numbers.
I've seen the numbers.
Dive in a little bit more. Tell us about the numbers that speak to this.
Well, I
without giving away
I can't
right,
get
intellectual
too specific.
property.
Yeah, some of it's intellectual property, right? So, but yeah, I can say in general, that customer that just comes to your website and places an order is less likely to return, right? There's less loyalty, that sort of thing. You have an opportunity when you actually interact with the customer as an agent interacting with the customer to actually build a brand loyalty. Now, there's lots of ways you can accomplish that, right? Amazon accomplished some brand loyalty through speed and other methods.
Recommendations.
Exactly, and ease of use. So those things are all great, but to build a long-term relationship that isn't just fleeting, it helps to have some personal touch.
Where is the inflection point between call time and building loyalty? So if you let me, the call center rep, stay on the phone for 10, 15 minutes, we're going to be all good with this one customer. But that simply can't happen.
Well, there's I have my own personal opinion on that. There's lots of companies that, are very extreme opposite ends of that discussion, right? You've got your Zappos who will spend an entire day talking to a customer.
Sure.
If the customer
that
wants
is literally the rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas, but some companies don't operate with big enough margins to be able to do that sort of thing, right? So, the thing is to treat the customer right, get their problem resolved, right, to overcome what the issue is the customer might be having. If it's just an order, that's coming in, to make sure that you're being very courteous, that you're asking questions, to make sure they don't have to call, first call resolution types of questions, make sure they're not having to call back again. And being courteous, as long as you're not making a bad impression, you're making a good impression, right? And so that personal contact, I'm not saying that you want to drive all your customers to not do bots and FAQs and all that sort of thing, but you
have to have that as well.
You have to have those things as well, right? To peel off kind of the easy stuff, but you shouldn't consider it a bad thing to spend a minute or two extra on a call. Because if you really look at your numbers, it's probably going to give you a long-term return on investment.
Like an umpire, as long as he doesn't make a bad call, he's doing a good job.
Right. Well, it's not as easy as that, but we do customer satisfaction scores and that sort of thing, and take a look at those. And there's something to the other thing I'm not a big fan of is scripting. A lot of companies do scripting, and it has its place, right? You got to do especially us in the credit, you've got to do some of your disclaimer statements and all that sort of thing. But
things that must be said, of course.
Exactly. But I find it better our employees actually stay more engaged if they're having a conversation where they have to actually think about what they're going to say next, as opposed to just reading off a screen.
If you're not scripting them, though, how do you train that? You're talking about training someone to have a personality, which is theirs.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, what you do is you give them, again, we purposely hire in certain markets to try and get some of that naturally, but we also fortify it with giving them the opportunity, some customer service training on how to overcome objections and how to actively listen, because it's easier to have a conversation if you're actually listening to the person and then reiterating back to them what you just heard to make sure you understand everything, diffusing upset customers and that sort of thing. So There's opportunities to build skills in people who maybe come as a blank slate, or sometimes you have people, it's their first real job or what have you, like it was for me back long time ago. I won't say when.
So we're talking about today and yesterday. As far as what has changed most, I'm getting the sense from you that there are some basics here that don't change from when you started to today.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say most of the fundamentals, I've worked in 5 different contact centers now, and they're probably, the fundamentals are the same.
What is different?
What is different is the customer, right? The expectations of the customer. My parents, what they expected from somebody they were doing business with was very different, and what they wanted is very different than what I want. What my kids, what my children want is very different than the way I want to interact. So
let's break that down. So you're going from Boomer to Gen X, I would imagine you
yes,
and me.
I'm Gen X, yeah.
Exactly, and then you've got your kids, which are either Gen Z or whatever.
Yeah, they're Zs, yep.
Okay. What are those key differences?
The communication channels, really.
How so? Get into it.
Getting into the omni-channel. So the youth today, not necessarily in my current market, but in other places that I work, they don't want to interact with a person via the phone, right? For the most part, only if there's a problem, and if you got to that point, they're upset about something,
right?
So, you have to be able to get into the omni-channel world now, where you can still have a personal touch, but you've got to be a very creative writer now, as opposed to being having a verbal conversation. So, having to integrate those channels is probably the biggest thing that I've seen grow over the years. I remember them talking about email's going to take over and nobody's going to call anymore. Well, it didn't really happen because...
we're still here in 2017.
Yeah, phone's still king. Now, there's some companies that have certain types of customers where phone is not king, but in general, phone is still king.
Right.
So.
As far as that ultimate conflict resolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you've got that, when it's not a simple answer anymore.
Sure, chatbot on the front end, but once we get let's
to the
call
nuts
it
and bolts,
enraged customer, right?
Yes.
We're going to need someone to hop on the line.
Yes. Or if you don't have the information available to answer that question easily. Right?
I feel like you've answered all of these questions easily, Tim. I've got 3 final questions. I'll tell you what they are. I'll ask you them in order.
All right.
What's most surprised you at work along the way? What's most surprised you in life? And then on the soundtrack of Tim Fischer's life, one track, one song that's got to be on there. First things first, though. You've had a couple of different, truly different types of jobs, right? You've been a farmer. You've worked for HP, and everything in between. What's most surprised you at work?
It's always people, right? It's a people business. I think that's probably one of the most rewarding parts of my job is, I started out on the front line. I moved up over the years and being able to help others. And some people have really surprised me over the years that have really taken off in their careers. And then there's also been people that surprised me the other ways. I had high expectations and they just crashed and burned. So I think a big part of the enjoyment for the job for me is all the people I get to meet over the years.
Speaking in generalizations, when you have a win, what is it about that person? I'm sure you have many examples. Is there a key central theme in folks that surprise you on the upside?
I think that it's probably people's ability to change or learn or to adapt. I'm big on change management. That's something I think is very important, especially with all the changes going on in the last decade here in the contact centers and technology and everything. There's some people that I don't expect to be able to make some of the changes and that sort of thing. And people surprise me all the time. So even still, so I think it's people adapting to technology that I wouldn't always expect to adapt to technology. So I would say don't discount people that you might have on your staff or in your call center. Make sure you give everybody a fair chance and give them the opportunities to be able to grow or continue. So.
This is the book cover theory, not judging the book by the cover.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about, sadly, we must discuss, surprising you to the downside? Is there a central theme in those folks?
Yeah, I guess I would say there's a lack of understanding of good customer service. I would say I go back to when I was a kid, and my father would take me a lot of places, farm kid in the summer at home. So I had to go everywhere my dad went. They wouldn't just leave me on the farm by myself. So I would say that excellent customer service isn't something that's naturally ingrained in a lot of people anymore because they don't receive that type of service, that it's hard for people to naturally build on examples that they then reciprocate to others.
Are you talking about basic human interaction?
Basic human interaction,
so
yeah.
Give us an
it's
example.
Really concerning to me, when you look at the millennials, the Zs, I even see it with my own kids, is the basic human interactions and politeness and respectful interactions with one another and that sort of thing. It seems to me that that's kind of deteriorated over time, and I can see it in my contact centers in my interactions when I call other contact centers. I see that. I think it's a little more prevalent. Could be because I'm getting older and maybe I'm more ornery about those sorts of things when they happen to me, but I would say there's a little bit degradation in understanding what service is.
I'm right there with you. You mentioned getting in the car and going with your dad. I wonder what you were thinking about, whether it's just walking into the general store, or is there a moment that you have in mind, or at least an example that you can give us?
As farmers, they all have a loan agent, right? And going to the loan agency, and I mean, they're the ones loaning the money, but they're still super courteous. They want to make sure they're keeping your business. Going to the insurance agents, right? You can sign up online, never even meet an insurance agent now, but going to the insurance agent's office, and they'd bend over backwards, and they'd even come to your house to sign the paperwork and meet the family and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of that personal touch, again, that we were talking about earlier, a lot of that seems to be missing, and those skills to actually have what I call more of a respectful type of interaction don't seem to be as strong anymore.
A more respectful type of interaction. I like that. What's most surprised you in life?
In life, well, I'm kind of. I guess I'd say I'm kind of excited about things right now. I guess I expected, sci-fi movies. We see a lot of things. The flying cars probably aren't too far away, right? I'm really excited about the things that are coming in the near future. Those are things I didn't think I'd see necessarily this early on in my lifetime. The fact
driverless cars, are we talking? What do we mean?
Well, we've got in call centers, for example, we've got the speech analytical software, and that's getting really strong. Very, being able to translate to the text, and then the computer learning behind it, and then now also we have the pretty soon we're going to have websites that you can actually talk to instead of clicking, and you can interact with your website. Video IVRs are coming, where you can actually interact with a video as on a website or something like that, and then also the hologram software. So pretty soon, I think back to movies like The Fifth Element, where they have the screen that uses your phone system, and it has a personality, and you're talking to it. That's probably only like 5 years off. If you combine all those technologies together, you're going to be able to interact with a hologram basically at some point here in the near future. So it's pretty interesting.
There we go. Princess Leia coming out of R2-D2. It's happening.
Exactly. Except she'll talk back to you and answer questions for you. So
even better.
Yep.
Tim, on the soundtrack of your life, one track, one song that's got to be on there.
It was probably more because of others than myself, but the Humpty Dance by MC Humpty for some reason. Yeah, and that's just because I karaoke the song a bit. So, and I will surprise people, which is really about what the song's going to. And I like to dance, so I guess that's all. It all wraps it up into one thing. I don't associate my song with my career necessarily. It's more about the fun I try to have in life. So.
Absolutely, and surprising people to the upside, because if you don't know the song that Tim is talking about, please stop this and go to YouTube and play that.
Yeah. You're sitting here looking at me. I probably don't look like a rap kind of guy, but yeah, that's I enjoy that song.
You and I are probably about the same age because I love that song. You can't. It's in the blood, right?
Yeah.
So. Tim Fischer, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And there you have Tim Fischer. On a farm, if something breaks down, you've got to fix it, right? You got to do it. You got to figure it out. And the thing that you have to watch out for is the customer. You want the long-term play with the customer. You don't want them to be one and done. Very much appreciate Tim Fischer's time. Appreciate yours. Stay tuned.